Thanks, David. Thanks, everybody, for joining today. Our topic today is an overview of key use cases for generative AI in project management. So happy to be presenting on this today. So, got a lot of material to cover, so let's get on going. Couple things before we start. I'm going to go over the agenda here for the day. Um, for today, we're going to try to highlight some of the most obvious use cases and some of the most important use cases for project managers who are looking to integrate generative AI assistance into their project management work. So we'll cover a few of these use cases here. These are the ones that we're highlighting. And I just want to set a few expectations for the next hour or so. The first one being that when we talk about use cases in project management for Gen AI, there are just so many. I'd venture to say there's a million use cases, and most of them we really haven't even discovered yet. So I just want to be clear that this is not necessarily a comprehensive uh, discussion of every single possible use case. And it's not really even a discussion of a discrete list of super specific use cases. What I really want to do is hopefully ignite your imagination a little bit in terms of getting you thinking about how you can discover your own use cases, some of the tools and capabilities that generative AI is really good at, and help you identify opportunities to use generative AI in project management work. Now, with that said, we do have some specific use case information for you today, but I just don't want to set the bar too high in terms of promising a complete and comprehensive playbook of project management use cases. That's still very much being discovered and developed even as we speak. And then the other thing is, each one of these use cases is not one specific topic, right? So, what I really want to do is sort of show and tell, and we'll touch on multiple use cases at once, and we'll kind of meander our way through, right? So, we will touch on all of these items: risk assessment, resource planning, capacity, stakeholder communication. That's a big one. We'll touch a little bit towards the end on some advanced generative AI strategies, which kind of takes a little bit more of a different tack for the project manager. We'll talk about some tools, and then we'll talk about some project management customization. But rather than just like spelling it through one, two, three around particular use cases, we want to touch on these use cases while demonstrating some of the generative AI capabilities. And then the last thing I should say is that, I probably have just as much to learn from you guys as is used from me. So, it's not so much about a one-sided delivery of expertise. It's a knowledge sharing space, and we're here to share with each other and to evangelize what we've learned. We're all coming at things from a slightly different point of view and in a different role. So just keep that in mind, and don't be afraid to throw things into the chat, throw questions out there. And we can share our knowledge together. All right. So with that, let's get going. We've got a couple of polls here we're going to run, and I'm going to administer this first poll now. We'll give the poll about 30 seconds so that you can respond. The first poll here is just about your generative AI experience. So the poll is launched here. So you'll see that basically we kind of have three categories here. You don't use it at all. You're using it a little bit or tinkering maybe. And then finally, you find yourself regularly experimenting or maybe even using generative AI in your job, which is great. But really, all of these are great. There's no wrong answer. So I see those responses coming on in. Thank you for those. We'll leave them up for just one more minute here. Uh, Off the bat, looks like most of our responses are kind of falling somewhere in the middle. So we've got a little bit of exposure to generative AI, a little bit of usage. Some folks are messing with generative AI regularly, and I do hope you'll chime in with your experience. And then some folks have really not experimented with generative AI at all, and that's fine too. So we hope we've got some good information for you today. All right, so the responses are slowing down, so I'll end that one. Thank you very much. Almost everybody answered the poll. Really appreciate that. I'll share the results here for just one moment so you can see how the group responded. And then we'll continue on with one more poll, which is a little bit more relevant to today's specific conversation. And this is about how you think generative AI could help you. So I'm going to stop sharing our last results. And we'll do one more poll here. You'll see this come up in just a moment. There you go. So this is not an exhaustive list, but to be sure, it's some common applications, some common usage. So this is mostly just for our own curiosity. We're really wanting to understand where you see potential to take advantage of the assistance that generative AI offers, and in particular with project management work. So you'll see that most of these things have to do with the types of work that a project manager does. So I see those responses coming on in quite quickly. Thank you again for that. We'll leave this up for just one more moment here, and it'll give me a little opportunity maybe to check the chat. Really appreciate everybody saying hi in the chat. We've got some good LinkedIn profiles provided there, so do feel free to network there, connect with everybody. Beverly says it's a pity we could only choose one. That's a great point. Sure. So limitation of the poll, alas, but to be sure, we're going to seek to understand how we can apply some of these things. Hopefully multiple. All right. So our responses are winding down here. So we've got a pretty nice spread of application opportunities here. So going to end that poll. Most people responded. Again, thanks for that. We'll share the results here, and then we will get going with the rest of the presentation. Looks like data analysis was our #1 choice, followed with a close second by repetitive work. And I like those choices because those are exactly the ones that I would have chosen. And it's practically a tie, and I think those use cases are a pretty good tie in terms of potential for using generative AI. All right. So cool. Let's share those results real quick. And as we do that, we will keep on going here. And I just want to open the rest of the presentation with this citation from Gartner. Now, Gartner came out with this scary sounding press release a while ago in which they predicted that 80%, fully 80% of project management work will be essentially automated away from the project manager by 2030. Now, 2030 is not very far away. We're in 2024 here. It's almost halfway through the decade. And I think, what I want to call our attention to, the thing that's really interesting about this particular piece of research or predictive information is that, this was actually done in 2019. So if you think back to March 2019 here when Gartner released this, this was a while ago, but in particular, it was well before the big, huge blow up and the big, huge gold rush we've seen over the last 2.5 years around generative AI. So I think that's very interesting. And I have to wonder, would Gartner have shifted their perspective here, perhaps even more in favor of automating project management work away had we had the experience of the last 2 years, because just so much has been happening. I'm not here to cite this as a scary piece of information. I think more importantly, it's important to understand how can we stay with the times as project managers, and how can we use this as a tool to enhance our work and to enhance our own capabilities, because for certain, the project managers and the folks in industry who are able to use generative AI to assist them with their job are going to be the ones that kind of stay on top of the curve. And they're also going to expand their own capability in ways that unlock a lot of new work potential. So where can generative AI help specifically to project management work? This is just a snapshot. Again, not an exhaustive list, but I would say probably the most common ones, if you think about sort of project management AI use cases. I won't necessarily spell through all these one by one, but these are some common ones. You see some automation use cases here, repetitive work. This is kind of this mechanistic tasks, as we mentioned during the poll. But then there's some project-specific applications as well. Resource planning, capacity planning, and forecasting. Those are really hot topics, even just outside of AI these days. And AI has some good applications for helping with this stuff. reporting and data set analysis, these kind of number 2 and number 5, anything where we're manipulating data or we want to extract insights and communicate those insights from the data, AI is well suited for that kind of stuff. The reason being that generative AI is quite good at ingesting data sets, as long as those data sets are sort of oriented around language. Now, the English language is kind of what we think about first, because the large language models that power the generative AI tools are built around these large language models. But it doesn't have to be English language. It doesn't even have to be human language. It can be code or machine language. And those things follow the same types of semantic structures that our spoken word does as well. So the large language models are quite good at those kinds of things. Over here on the right, some other project management specific use cases. Communication with stakeholders. Now, the generative AI tools are quite good at creating content. That's kind of their primary purpose. They generate stuff. So when you're talking about generating things that are text-based, content-based, updates, stakeholder messaging, meeting minutes, extracting key points from meetings, things like that, generative AI has a lot to offer there. Generative AI can also be good at parsing particular things out of data sets that might get a little large or a little laborious for us to pick our way through. So risk assessment, for instance. And I will touch on this a little bit more in some of the demos here in just a couple minutes. And then finally, just integrating the generative AI tools into our other project management information systems or the other tools that underpin our project management work. A couple named here, obviously, MS Project. If I have time, I want to talk about Dynamics 365 and project operations a little bit, because project operations and a lot of the workspaces in D365 come now with Microsoft's Copilot on board. That Copilot behaves a lot like something like ChatGPT, but it's all baked into the workspace context. So that's pretty cool. And then again, if we have time at the end, I'll talk a little bit about advanced applications. And that's a little bit of a different deal because it's not a specific tool. It's not a specific project management use case. It's more about using the human skills of the project manager to leverage teams and leverage organizational capability in ways that really take you up to the next level as a team and as an organization around AI usage. All right. So I want to take a quick step back away from the project management specific use cases, and let's just take a second to talk about what generative AI is just good at in general. Because that'll help us to identify use cases and to navigate how we can apply the generative AI to the use cases that we put our finger on. And so it's good to kind of have a good basic understanding of what generative AI is good at, what it's not so good at, and then go from there. So on the left, these are a few of my picks. I think, these are sort of like meta capabilities that the generative AI offers. And then on the right, there's some good caveats that the generative AI is generally not good at. So first, as I mentioned, the generative AI tools that we're talking about are primarily built around these large language models. Now, we've talked about the nature of these models, their architecture, how they work other times. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that today. But I think the thing to understand about this is that the way these models work, they're machine learning models that at heart, they do something that's pretty simple to understand conceptually, right? What they're able to do is they're able to ingest and analyze gigantic language-based data sets. So, many hundreds of gigabytes or even terabytes of information that is primarily in sort of a language form. And many little parameters can analyze statistical relationships between the way that language works. And then when you do this across a large enough data set, the learning model is able to identify the way those statistical relationships work. And it's very interesting because what we find is when we use language, if you type enough of that language into the learning model, the relationships in the way that we use language and words and the structure of our language, those things can be modeled statistically by the computers. And then it's able to take those statistical relationships, it's able to apply them to new stuff and generate new stuff that looks a lot like our stuff. And it's gotten very good at those. So basically, what's the takeaway here? Any use case that involves sort of language-based or semantically based data sets, whether it's language, whether it's code, whether it's some other type of data set that fits this type of a description. The generative AI tools are quite good at working with those. So that's thing one. Thing two, analysis of these types of data sets. So not only do the generative AI models use these LLMs to create and produce new content, but they're quite good often at analyzing existing data sets that we provide to the LLM. So the LLM is trained on the initial large language data set, but then we can provide it with additional data sets. This becomes very handy as a project manager because we have to wade our way through and analyze lots of different documentation, lots of different project information, a lot of different moving parts as we manage through our project plan. And then the final one that I think is worth mentioning is image generation. Now, the image generation is quite interesting because it still works based off language, but the learning models are able to identify the relationships in the way that we depict things, we visualize things using language, and it's able to kind of make associations around how we visualize and see things like that. So that means that it's actually very good at generating images as well. Sometimes I think it's actually better at creating visual content than it is language content. And then just briefly, a couple of the things it's not so good at. LLMs are not very good at math. So you got to be careful. Now, there are enhancements that you can use. There's some nice plugins and tuning data sets and things like that that can make the LLMs a little better at math. But anything that gets very sophisticated, just as a rule of thumb, the generative AI is not that great at. So we want to keep the AI usage primarily oriented around language-based data sets. And if you are using it for something that's a little bit mathematical, you just want to be careful and make sure you check that. And then finally, at the end of the day, for now at least, anything that is really, truly innovative, unique, new, truly creative, for now, that's still kind of the domain of the human. So it makes for a good working relationship if we use generative AI as a project manager, or we can leverage what the LLM is good at, but it's not always good at really cracking a tough problem where you really need novel thinking, a novel solution. So that's that. What it's good at, what it's not good at, just in general. Now, let's get back to this idea of analyzing data sets because we're going to use this concept quite a bit for the remainder of the conversation here. A really cool thing as a project manager about using a generative AI tool is that we can ingest and aggregate data sets as long as we can export it out of tools that we use as project managers in a form that the data set can be analyzed by the AI. So a few examples here. We can take ADO data, we can take Jira data, Trello data. I've got a little example of a Trello export. I'm going to show you how we do that here in just a few minutes, or just documentation, flat files, anything like that. Now, we can bring those in as our reference data sets with a little bit more sophisticated engineering and maybe some help from our team. We can even aggregate those data sets together, and then that becomes a very powerful source of reference material. So we have a sort of reference data set layer in there, and then there's the user interface layer here where that's what we're usually used to dealing with, the chat bot, and that's where prompting and things come in handy to know how to make sure we can get the analysis that we need. But there's a lot of other formats of data set that can be used here, but these are some of the most common ones. But this is just a super simplified architecture here. Now, there are a few concerns and challenges that I want to highlight before we get too far along here. Mainly these are around data sensitivity and privacy and security issues. I mean, as we've talked about in previous streams and previous webinars, the AI tools can make mistakes as well. So you don't just want to blindly trust the output of these tools. They can make really weird mistakes. They will lie to you. They will hallucinate. And that can be a problem. So you just want to make sure that you're double checking anything that you use it for. You don't ever just want to straight up copy and paste something that a generative AI hands you and just consider it gospel. I mean, it's a good way to get in trouble. Also, policy is sometimes a challenge. So in large organizations in particular, a lot of folks have policies that prevent people from even accessing tools like ChatGPT, commonly available, SaaS-based generative AI tools. So that can be a challenge. Um, the reason for that is primarily because if you provide data that's company specific into a tool like ChatGPT or something like that, then you're exposing that information onto the web. And that information kind of becomes sucked into the learning data set, and OpenAI and folks like that are all too happy to use whatever data you provide them to continue making their models better and continue making their service better. But you can well imagine a lot of situations in which you would not want to do that. So that presents a challenge because the functionality of the generative AI tool can be barred to you, right? Now, there's an important implication to that, and I think that as a project manager, it's a very important implication, and that is that there are now a lot of available solutions for standing up very robust, very sophisticated generative AI tools like ChatGPT or any of this array of other tools internally, kind of behind your own walled garden, that's fed and trained on your own company data, allows you to get more benefit than the publicly available service, because now you have a model that is contextually trained on your own company data. You can query it about stuff that might be sensitive, customer specific, solution specific, et cetera. So internal LLMs are showing a lot of promise. To be sure, it's something that a lot of companies are interested in doing. It's only just starting to ramp up. But even then, the tools may not suit all your needs. So it's just important to always stay aware of the strengths and the weaknesses of the tool. And I call out one quick example here. NVIDIA has a platform called NeMo. I actually misspelled that there. I called it Nemo, but it's actually NeMo, and they have some associated plugins that go along with this to allow you to set up internal LLMs. And now this is a somewhat of an undertaking, takes a team, and we'll talk a little bit about those teams here in a minute. All right, so that's the level setting around generative AI tools. Starting to get into some project management specifics. But let's get into tools that very specifically you'll get a lot of utility out of as a project manager. I'm going to try to briefly demo a couple of these too, just because they're so cool. So, don't know that we have time again to go through these one by one, but again, you'll get these slides, you get these recordings. You can go and check these out. But if you scan this list, you'll see right away that there are some very ubiquitous enterprise tool sets that are already either baking in generative AI or that will allow you to interoperate with your own generative AI tool or even a tool like ChatGPT. So Atlassian, tools like Jira and stuff like that. Obviously, a lot of the world of project management relies on those tool sets to manage the workflow and track the work and do all the things. GitHub Copilot as well, sort of an LLM for software developers, very powerful. One caveat there, I do believe Microsoft owns any code that's generated by that tool. So again, these legality issues rear their head. Microsoft Suite, I mentioned D365 a moment ago, whether you're using the Cloud Office version of Microsoft Project or whether you're using project operations in Microsoft Dynamics, you can leverage the generative AI capacity there. Now, as I mentioned, D365 project operations has Copilot baked in. Microsoft Project, not so much, but again, it's quite easy to export data sets and then interoperate using other kind of vanilla generative AI tools. So those are some good ones here. Some of these are free to access. Some of these are paid. I haven't called that out here, but some of the ones, none of them are terribly expensive, but some of them do require a subscription, and in particular, some of the ones that offer a little more robust project management specific capability. So this one, Ofolio, for instance, this one it's a very powerful tool that's really tailored specifically for project and portfolio management, program management, and so the capacity there is tuned to the types of work that we need to do. So check that out. But again, that is a paid tool. Again, I won't go through these all at one time here, but do want to call these out. And then I've got some more here. So Pika, D365, Scope Master is a really cool one. And I'm actually just going to pause for a moment. And I don't usually do this, but I'm going to very briefly do it here today just because I thought that this was so cool. I'm going to share a really quick video from Scope Master. And I should say, I'm not affiliated with Scope Master in any way, but I just thought that they did a great job of really describing the types of things that generative AI, when it's built specifically for project management work or business analysis, it kind of opened my mind around sort of what's possible, and it's possible in this tool set. So just check this out. Again, this is not a commercial for Scope Master, but it is very informative about getting you thinking about just what's possible. So give me just a second. Okay, check this out real quick.
On software projects, one of the biggest problems is poor requirements. Garbage in, garbage out. And large projects have very high failure rates, and the root cause of as much as 35% of production defects can be traced back to poor or incomplete requirements. Hello, I'm Colin, and I'd like to introduce you to Scope Master, a tool that makes transparent use of AI to automate requirements analysis work on software projects. As a PM, I had discovered that knowing the functional size of a project helped me become a more capable and successful project and portfolio manager. But sizing them was tedious manual work. And as you'll see, Scope Master does the heavy lifting of that and a whole lot more. The overall result of using this tool is that you can deliver software projects faster, better, and cheaper. Now, written requirements or user stories are the bedrock of communicating between stakeholders of what is to be built. And that's where we'll start. Scope Master analyzes the written requirement to provide the author with instant feedback on how their wording might be interpreted by readers, and in doing so, he or she can adjust it quickly and efficiently until it is clear and broadly correct. Scope Master provides interpretation of functional intent, the users, the data movements, the cosmic function points. It gives quality feedback and proposes how the user story or the requirement might be tested, saving this test team a considerable amount of time. Where Scope Master gets particularly exciting is when we take a set of user stories and ingest them. And as you can see here, we are doing analysis on a set of stories very, very quickly. The result of which is insight across this set, such as this use case model diagram that allows us to see the users from a user's point of view, what the software will do for them. The CRUD analysis, which is very hard to do manually on software requirements, exposes missing requirements. Scope Master can also help bridge the gap between the requirements and the software design by proposing how the code might be organized. Overall, Scope Master delivers incredible insight and value very, very quickly. It's a power tool for...
All right, I'm going to stop that there. Just a few seconds left.
Business analysts,
you get
PMs,
the idea.
And PMOs.
So, it's very exciting to think about having an AI assistant for something like that, to be able to ingest user stories, to be able to matriculate user stories, requirements, project input documents, various inputs to the project plan, and cascade those things through our project plan in a way that we ordinarily would have to do manually. Very, very cool. Yes, Sophie, I will provide the Scope Master link Looks like Cooney's got me covered there. Thank you. Yeah, I am also sorry about the volume there. I had it all the way up, so did the best I could, but hopefully you were able to hear there. I know we had some volume challenges there. So yeah, and then you check out some of these other ones as well. Folio was one that I thought was really cool. And then another one that was listed was Humata, and I'm going to do a super fast demo on that if I have time. Let's move on here. And I want to talk for just a moment about automation in general. I think it's worth spending 3 or 4 minutes just on automation basics because at the end of the day, no matter what we're using generative AI for, we're kind of automating something. If we're not automating a process, we're automating our cognitive capability. We're automating the reasoning that we use to perform project management work. Automation, again, just like generative AI itself, it's good at some things and it's not good at some things. So if we're interested in use cases, and we're looking to identify use cases and put those into practice, it's good to kind of keep these things in the back of your mind. What's generative AI good at? What's it not good at? What's automation good at? What's automation not that good at? Generative AI, at the end of the day, it's a machine, and it's a machine for automating something, and it behaves just like any other machine in a lot of ways, right? So if we think about machines versus people, we each have our respective strengths and weaknesses, right? So if you think about machine attributes, machines are great at repetitive stuff, handling big, gigantic data sets that are too big for us to manage with our brains. They're really good at doing the same thing the same way over and over and over. They're really good at doing that just without stopping, never needing a break, never needing to rest. And they're also good at coming up with ways to do things in a repeatable process that can be scaled up. So we can, do things in production volumes, at volumes that we just wouldn't be able to do if we were doing hand-built work or manual work. Now, machines have some powerful limitations as well. They don't have instinct. They're very limited in terms of subtlety and context. So anything that's very contextually dependent, which is, a lot, if not most stuff, they don't excel well there. Right now, there are ways to create context when you're using generative AI. You can create a lot of context very easily just with how you prompt it, the training data that you provide it, and things like that. But you still run into a wall when it comes to nuanced context, the devil's in the details kind of a thing. It's not good at that. It's not good also at anything that relies on our sort of psychosocial dynamics or emotions or anything like that. And you can't understate that because those dynamics inform a lot of our work and a lot of the things we do. Now, on the other side of the coin, what are humans good at? Humans are good at a lot of the things that the machines aren't good at. Instinctive judgment, gut feeling, intuition, things like that have a lot of value. They can have a lot of value in particular when they're augmented by things that machines are good at. But we're much better at the nuance of emotional perception, things that require contextual understanding and things like that. We can also pivot and do different things. So we can task switch or do something that is an absolutely and completely different type of work without having to completely reprogram our brain. That's not true of the machine. But of course, we have our challenges as well, and some of these challenges are well complemented by machine strength. So we get tired, we make mistakes. We really don't like to do the same thing over and over, and things like that. So last slide on automation here, just in terms of using automation basics to identify potential use cases. These are some good things that it's good to canvas for. So if we're looking for whether it's project management work or any work, it's good to try to canvas for things that fit this criteria, right? Is it routine? Is it data intensive? Is it a repeatable process, a standardized operation that we can quantify and put into the model and just have it do over and over? Is it something that fits within the bounds of the level of creativity that generative AI can produce? Because it can produce some, but it has its limits. Do we have particularly repetitive or stable environments where the machine might be as good or better at doing it than we might? error tolerance. Depending on what our tolerance for error is, the machines can be really good at staying within fine tolerances, but again, can make mistakes. So we want to check that. Working at scale, obviously compute platforms are great at this, and that's one of their most important strengths, in my opinion. And then how compatible are things with what we're already doing, right? So we don't want to re-engineer our entire set of business processes just to accommodate, automation use case. So that's just a super rapid fire buzz through some automation basics, and want you to keep those in mind. So let's bring this to life a little bit. One other resource I did have to share here. Another thing you can do to identify automation use cases here is calculate how much time you might save. So I wanted to show you this real quick. This is actually a little automation calculator that I built, and the link is in the slides there, but you can actually calculate time saved with automation if you are looking to sort of evaluate, is an automation solution worth investing time to develop? So you can use a calculator like this to calculate that kind of thing, right? So let's say you answer email 30 times a day. Let's say it takes you 2 minutes to answer each email. 2 minutes. You do it every day. You want to calculate the time you might save over the course of a year. Calculate. So you can see it's worth spending almost one full business day if there was a way to automate that. Now, you might not be able to automate answering your email, sadly, but this adds up. And if you don't have that much time to invest, or if the time savings isn't worth it, then it may just be worth moving on and looking for another use case, right? So calculating automation savings, I think, is pretty handy. Okay, so let's actually try this. Now, I have here sort of a prepared series of prompts. Now, in our last webinar, we went a little deeper into prompt logic and prompt engineering, and you can get that recording if you want to. But this is an example of a series of 5 prompts that I put together specifically to help us identify use cases in an agile project management context. So this could be used for really any project manager, but this is kind of oriented around the roles and the workflows of an agile project manager. So these 5 prompts, let's take a look at it. I've got an example here that I have prepared. So if you look at these prompts, you'll see here that I have prepared. All right, getting back to find my place here. So basically what I've done is the same type of automation criteria that I just shared with you. I have loaded that into my ChatGPT window, and then I said, just assist me to develop a framework, right? So using those types of automation criteria, this is the output. I'm not just going to read through this. I'll go through it really quickly. But this is sort of the starting content, and then we use the following prompts to elaborate on these. So you can see right away, these are just basic use cases that a project manager might be interested in. Next prompt, now we want to add an additional dimension to the output, the dimension of the job role, right? So then the generative AI goes ahead and it organizes the automation potential that it just gave me by job role and some specific types of duties that each job role might do. All right, so that's great. We've got some pretty typical team members listed here. Third prompt. We said, okay, great. So now we want to take those 2 dimensions that we discussed, and let's see if we can turn this into sort of a checklist that we can use to canvas for automation use case potential. And of course, that works pretty well. So now we can generate sort of a checklist by role. So for each role, we're generating a checklist. So we do this one role at a time because we don't want to overload ChatGPT with too much content, and we want to get a nice fleshed out, comprehensive list for each role. So the product owner first. Now, and I should say at this point, you can probably see like some of the output is not groundbreaking, right? Like this is not going to tell us anything new. We're probably, in most cases, way better at reasoning our way through this type of thing than an AI tool is going to be. But occasionally, it's going to give us something that's going to spark a really good idea. And I think, to me, that's really important when we're leveraging generative AI, is to understand that, you never, the AI is not going to just do your job for you, right? It's there to enhance your capability. It's there to augment, but you are in the driver's seat, right? Think of the AI as a power tool. You're a project manager. You're now given a power tool that you can use to do a lot of your project management duties with more speed, with more horsepower. So as you scan these things, you might get some good ideas, right? You might think, oh my goodness, I never really thought about. Let's see here, maybe I never thought about uh, looking at looking at our project reports to see where there might be good ideas for changes that need to get added into the project scope. Um, that might not be the best example, but I'm just pulling one off, right? So then the final prompt here, I think this is the final one, before we go on and generate this use case checklist for the other roles. We just ask it to reformat it into a form that's a little bit easier to read, right? So this is kind of the content that we end up getting, and we can work with our team to take a look and kind of canvas our work quickly and decide whether or not it's feasible for us to leverage these types of use cases, right? So then I just asked it to go ahead, and we just rolled on through the rest of the roles. So at this point, you get at least a piece of starter content that can help you canvas for use cases, right? And you can have a lot of fun with this. So then you kind of end up with content like this. And you just saw this in the window, but this can be then formed into artifacts, or you can work with your team to push this further or formalize it if you want to. But this is the type of output that we might get, right? And then here I've asked you to give some examples. And again, not all of these will apply, but some may, and you might find that it saves you some time. So that's just a super basic, kind of oversimplified framework for how you can use a 5-prompt series to not just articulate or actually get plugged into a very specific use case, but actually to create a frame for identifying use cases. And as I said at the very beginning, there's just so many use cases that I think it's kind of a fool's errand to try to elaborate like every single possible use case. It's way more powerful to understand how can we gauge and assess for use cases, right? But with that said, I do actually want to play around with some other slightly more specific use cases, and I'm gonna demo a little bit of these. I'm gonna stop for just 1 second to check the Q&A. Good question here from Michael. Any privacy concerns with ScopeMaster? I don't know. I really haven't used ScopeMaster. I just think it's super cool looking. It's on my list of things to work with, but I can't speak to that. I think it's a really good question, and you would definitely want to be sure. The types of capacity that it is advertising. You could use it for some pretty intense enterprise work, and then that would definitely, I think, open you up to wanting to make sure that the privacy concerns were addressed. So I'm sorry, I don't know. All right, I'm going to peruse the chat very quick. Yep, agreed with that. The output is it's pretty good. It's not always ideal, but it can be good. And I think the trick again is to pick out what's good from what might not be useful. And just because it's not good, it doesn't always mean it's bad. It just might mean it's not really giving you anything that you couldn't come up with yourself. Okay, so for the remainder here, I've got one or two sort of project example scenarios that I want to think about. So in this example, I want to imagine that we're a project manager and we are going to be in charge of a project to stand up and implement an internal large language model. Mentioned at the beginning of the talk that this is something that a lot of organizations are interested in doing. It solves a lot of problems for enterprise professionals by allaying a lot of the privacy concerns. Allows us to work with more context. Like there's all kinds of reasons why an internal LLM would be a good thing to have. But there's another reason this makes for a good example project scenario, and that's because standing up an internal LLM, at the end of the day, there's a lot of project management aspects to it that really look a lot like any other type of enterprise software project, right? Like you're still going to have to do a lot of the same things to implement internal LLM functionality that you would need to do to integrate or stand up other types of features or functionality, COTS products or whatever. So, we can learn a lot about just basic like subject agnostic project management work, but also learn about talking about LLMs a little bit by considering this our test project, if you will. So I'm going to take a moment here and I'm going to do a little demo for you. All right, so the first thing at the beginning, we talked about using generative AI to assist us with our communication and with our reporting. So let's look at how we might be able to do that. As a project manager, in general, like 90% of our job is related in some way to communication, keeping all the threads connected, keeping all the stakeholders connected, communicating status, progress, milestones, might be documentation or something like that. But like all of these things have to do with communication. So let's think about how we can do this. So I'm going to pull up, I have here in another window. Let's pretend like we're project manager and we're embarking on this internal LLM project. And as part of the LLM project, one of the first things we would certainly want to do is we would want to assess the quality of the training data that we're going to use with our team to train the internal tool. And as part of that, we might assess the types of training data that we're going to use. And so what I have here is I've just kind of fabricated this like hypothetical survey where we've surveyed 5 or 6 different job roles. So you can see down here at the beginning, let me see if I can make this a little bit larger for you guys. Okay. So you can see down here, we've got like 5 or 6 roles. And so we've surveyed a sample of 50 team members from the data governance team, the finance team, the IT team, the data engineering team, and the legal team. Now, those are typically the types of stakeholders we would want to engage with for some sort of large software implementation project. And the LLM project is no exception, right? So what we've done here is we've assumed we've got all these job roles here. They're all aggregated on this tab here into all of them. And we've got kind of like these hypothetical survey responses here. All right, so we've got this then. This represents a data set that we can use. And then we've also got here a sample of data that we might actually consider an actual data set that our data engineering team might use as part of the training data for the system. So this is, it could be sensitive data. Now this is a publicly available sample data set. So it is bank transaction data, but it's not actually anything sensitive, but it does a good job of kind of simulating something that could be sensitive, right? So this is pretty large data set, right? Like tens of thousands of, many lines of, it might be like, I think it's like a couple 100,000 lines of data. So this might just be one of many hypothetical data sets that we need to aggregate in, cleanse, and pre-format for our training data. So these are the 2 data sets that I'm going to start with here: the survey data from our stakeholders, and then the actual data that we might use as part of the training data. So then what I've done here is I've used data analyst within ChatGPT to pull this data set, the sentiment analysis survey reporting, and I've prompted it like this, right? I'm a project manager who's overseeing the data prep phase of an internal LLM implementation. And then I've built this. This is not the easiest to read, but this is the prompt that I put together. And I asked it to perform sentiment analysis to break down, these different categories, the teammates, concerns that got identified, and other like sentiment analysis specifics, right? So pulling the data set in, I've used the AI to prompt it to do these things. And then, you do need a subscription to GPT-4. It's a premium service. We're going to use a data analyst. But for $20 a month, you can get this capability. There's other tools you can do to do similar things like this, like Humata. I'll demo that if I have time. So this is the output. You can see the GPT data analyst ingested the CSV. Important point there, by the way, like a CSV is a good format to try to interoperate file formats in between the AI tools and other project platforms. If you need to port something over, it can do other forms as well, which I'll mention in a minute, a little bit more about that. So here, this is basically the raw sentiment analysis is done. You can see it's done pretty good. So it's followed my instructions quite well. I've asked it for some risk identification. I've asked it to qualify the risk, identify themes. It gives us some data here about how many people responded, and then it kind of calls out some of the themes here. This is starting to help us understand, without us having to read whatever 500 survey responses, the data analyst can do this for us, and we can kind of start to put our finger on the general sentiment of the stakeholder group. And this can help us identify concerns or maybe even changes or tasks that we need to bake into the project. And then finally, we've asked it to use the sentiment analysis based on the stakeholder feedback to identify some risks, right? So this is the output. And then finally, on the risk tip, I also provided the data analyst with the bank data set sample. So again, when we're talking about working with large data sets, that was a very large data set, 100,000 rows of data or whatever. The GPT data analyst was able to take that, analyze it, kind of gives us a quick summary of what's contained in the data set, and then make some basic observations about concerns that it might have. And then, you might get something that looks a little bit like this at the end of that. This is for Apex, is our LLM project. And this is just a report that's almost all 99% GPT generated content, in which I also have asked it to provide a summary of the survey methodology that we've used, what it did, and then we've organized the information just a little bit to make it look a little bit prettier. So you can see how this type of thing would be pretty useful, right? And then finally, down here, we've got a very super simple risk register that we can use to begin getting our head around these risks, okay? So that's that. Want to go back now, though. I do have, show this for just a minute. So that's sentiment analysis, but we've done a little bit more than just sentiment analysis. We've gone from sentiment analysis through to some risk identification. And now I want to continue along the same track to look at some ways we might use the generative AI to help us with risk mitigation, and maybe even do some things like decomposing some of the tasks that would be needed to mitigate the risks, even all the way down through user stories into a WBS. And I'll show you a little bit about that here. So I showed you this little example risk register that we extracted from the sentiment analysis. So what I've done then is I've taken just the risk register, and I have then started a new analyst session with GPT-4, uploaded the risks, and asked it to do a couple things. And I've specified right away that I want a fairly PNP friendly risk, WBS. Right now, this is, again, it's going to be kind of super simplified, but the idea here is to get you thinking about how you might be able to do this. So based on its first pass at the analysis, it's broken down the tasks that would be needed to mitigate the risks by role, by job. So here's a little summary of that. It has given very basic starting points in terms of time frames. So now, again, this is not gospel. This is subject to the teams or the team's estimates and our own capacity processes, but at least it gives us a place to start. And then I liked that. So I said, okay, cool, form that into a chart. We can now see the output of the analysis very easily. And then I said, okay, let's just play around with turning those tasks into user stories. Now, in a tool like Scope Master or something like that, probably do this in a much more robust way, but this gives you an idea of how you might be able to play around with it, right? So here we've broken down And again, some of these might not be good, some of them might be good, but we can pick and choose, right? We are the human in the loop. So here you've got your user stories, and then just pushing it a little farther, I asked it to go ahead and further decompose the user stories into a potential WBS. So, this may or may not be the way that you want to do things, but it might be something that would be useful. And then in putting this in ASCII format, now this is in a format that we can come up here, we can copy this data, and then we can ingest it back into our PMIS or our project management platform. Okay, so that's that. I've got one more example, and I think then we're probably about out of time. I just
Can
wanted to show
we,
you.
Chris, can I interrupt you with a
Please.
question about that example we got in the chat here from John? Says, do you have to clean the CSV data before you feed it into ChatGPT-4, or you just feed the unstructured CSV data and ChatGPT does it all for you? Just asking out of curiosity.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, in general, it's no but, right? And the real answer is it depends, but you don't have to cleanse the data or format it as long as it's in like a semi-structured format. Now, obviously, like GPT data analyst and these other tools, they can't ingest the same type of completely unstructured data sets, that like a Hadoop configuration might, right? Like where it can actually apply data models to video and like completely unstructured data. But you don't have to have it perfectly cleansed. In fact, in my experience, the ChatGPT-4 at least, it's quite good at kind of like parsing the general gist, which is one thing that's really cool about it. But if you're going to get up to enterprise scale application, cleansing and structuring those data sets becomes way more important. And that's going to be something like that you can't do that by yourself. That's going to have to be a project phase. Get the data prep is going to be something that you're going to need to work with your data engineering team to do. But just to do this sort of small scale example like I showed, nope, not really. The LLM is actually quite good at understanding signal from noise, and it can distill the results pretty effectively. So I hope that helps.
Great.
Okay, I know we're getting pretty short on time. I just wanted to show you this one other example because it's one other import export. So Trello is something a lot of our teams use, obviously. I've got here, this is a real project that I'm working on right now. This is a project for the Attainable platform that I'm working on with one of my partners. So you can see here, we've got all our Trello data. Now, if we come over here, we can export Trello data in these forms. We can export as either CSV or JSON. I have used JSON here because it's just a little bit more exotic looking when you're not looking at it as a developer. So this is now our Trello board. So, and in some ways, I think this might sort of speak to the question that you just asked. So this is what this is going to look to us like as the project manager, right? This goes on and on and on. We got a super deep JSON file here. But when I come over here to GPT-4 data analyst and we ingest the attainable CSV, and actually this is the CSV example. I've got another one here somewhere that I use the JSON document. I did find it worked a little better with CSV, but you can use either one. But the point is, that's completely not discernible to us, right? Like we might be able to poke our way through a CSV file, but probably not a JSON file. And then now I'm able to query data analyst about attributes of the project file that might be useful to me as a project manager, right? So I can kind of start to get an idea of like how many cards are assigned to whom, where might there be a bottleneck, where might there be delays, what might be late, things like that. So, and again, like the use cases for this type of thing just go on and on. But this is pretty cool that I could just export my Trello data into a raw format and then use data analysts to query it and ask questions about it, right? So we are at the hour. I just about got through, I think, everything I wanted to cover. I had hoped to talk a little bit more about advanced use cases and private LLMs, but we've actually got an upcoming webinar just on private LLMs. So we're going to talk about that in much more depth. And so hope we'll you'll join for that. Laura, I'll kick it back to you. Anything you want to close out with? I'm also happy just to hang on the line for like 5-10 minutes if anybody has questions or just wants to talk, even though the actual time is over, if that's okay with you, Laura.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much, everyone, for making the time to be here. We really appreciate it. As I mentioned in the chat, Chris is teaching a generative AI for project management course coming up in March. If you're interested in that, everyone here on the webinar, we'd like to offer you a 20% discount. You're welcome to email me, Laura, LARAH, at softdead.com. And I did put a link to that. The information's on our website. So check that out if you're interested in diving deeper. And of course, as Chris mentioned, we have a series of webinars coming up. They're all free. They're all about an hour, usually Wednesdays at 1. And he's got another one in a couple weeks. You can go to our Learning Hub. I'll drop the link to the chat and you can sign up for the future webinars that are coming up. There's some really good ones. The next one is on Valentine's Day. So that one is implementing private large language models for in-house AI solutions. And then we have one towards the end of the month on generative AI in the legal and compliance arena, a brief snapshot. So that one is going to be a really important topic as well. So let me just drop that link in the chat and see if there's any other questions before we sign off. Again, I'll be sending out the recording. Give me about a day or so, and you should see that in your inbox, as well as the slides and the code for the PDU credit. Looks like a lot of thank yous to Chris. Learned so much, very helpful. A lot of really good feedback here in the chat. We really appreciate that. If you have any other feedback or questions, please feel free to reach out to us either on LinkedIn or by email, as I mentioned. And yep, I don't see any questions there or in the Q&A, unless I'm missing anything. Chris, do you see anything?
Nope, just really appreciate all the feedback and really just appreciate everybody's time. I know your time is valuable, so thanks for giving us an hour today.
Absolutely. Have a good rest of the day, everyone. Hope to see you
Thanks,
next
everybody.
time.
See you next time.